We know how dominant Red Bull are this season and the previous one, as the RB19 just keeps winning and winning. The team's superiority is further helped by the sheer talent Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez have, with the young Dutch steaming towards his third title. But that might change soon enough, as the teams behind them are improving slowly, making changes, and Red Bull is yet to be hit by the wind tunnel restrictions from last year. So will this close the gap between the Austrian team and the rest of the grid? Or will it not be that big of a deal? Let's take a look. Red Bull won once again, this time in Australia, despite the chaotic race. It looks like no matter what, there are three things certain in life: death, taxes, and Red Bull winning, or at least being on the podium. Despite Perez starting from literally back of the grid, he managed to finish fifth and net a decent chunk of points for himself and his team. But everyone in Milton Keynes are aware that midway through the season, the team will be hit by those wind tunnel and computational fluid dynamics (CFD) restrictions, which may hinder their chances of winning the title this season, or at least give the other teams a chance of catching up. One team that is particularly looking good after a bad start of the season is Mercedes. The team's chief technical officer, James Allison, says the team is working on suspension updates with a view to addressing Lewis Hamilton's key concerns. Hamilton said at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that he didn't feel connected to the car, and even before the Australian GP, he said that the cockpit is too far forward, which makes it harder for him to steer. Allison says that Mercedes will use the time before the Azerbaijan GP at the end of April to work on the mechanical parts of the W14 F1 car, in addition to the big aerodynamic changes that are already going on. They are using a combination of wind tunnel testing, drawing office work, and simulation to find more downforce, improve the car's balance, and make it more drivable. Additionally, they are working to prepare for upcoming race weekends and ensure that the car is ready to perform at its best when it hits the track. Allison said that it's important to get the setup right in the simulator for Azerbaijan, where first practice will be followed by qualifying as part of a sprint weekend. He expressed a sense of quiet satisfaction that they were able to make progress with the car's performance, even though there were no major breakthroughs. However, he also acknowledged the disappointment that only one of their cars finished the race, and that George was unable to showcase his potential on race day despite a strong performance in practice. Overall, Allison feels that the team has made small gains and is now beginning to catch up with the Ferraris and Aston Martins, although they still have some ground to cover to compete with the leaders Red Bull. Hamilton led the field at the first restart, but it wasn't long before Verstappen breezed past in a car that looked to be more rocket ship than anything compared to the Mercedes. Considering the pace of the Red Bulls and the issues that Mercedes have been having with the W14, Hamilton was pleasantly surprised to finish second. But the more interesting quote came out of George Russell, who did a funny comparison of the W14. More on that in a second. It was very unexpected, the seven-time world champion said in the press conference after the race. Obviously just coming into the weekend, but obviously also getting a second and third and qualifying yesterday really blew us all away and a huge boost of energy throughout the team. So that meant today we had a shot at, trying to at least overtake Max for a second. And so we both got ahead, which was amazing. To have a Mercedes 1-2 for a second. And obviously he came sailing by at one point, but it was a really entertaining race, and I had a really good battle with Fernando, which was awesome. Hamilton expressed discomfort and a lack of connection with the car, but despite this, he is doing his best to perform well and is working hard to improve his connection with the vehicle. He admitted that this will be a long-term project, but he is pleased the team was able to compete with the Aston Martins despite being down on performance and pace compared to the Red Bulls. Hamilton gave credit to the team back at the factory and expresses a determination to keep pushing and close the gap with their competitors, even though it will be tough. George Russell went ahead and compared the W14 to a lame horse, claiming the team's job across the 2023 Formula One season is to make it fast and tame. Asked by German publication Bild if the uncompetitive Williams, in which he spent the first 3 seasons of his F1 career, was easier to drive than his current Mercedes, Russell stated, "It is comparable to riding a horse. A Mercedes is a faster horse than a Williams, but it's not just about speed. Riding a horse from A to B and it doesn't zig is like sitting in a Formula One car that suits your driving style. One merges into another. At the moment, however, we have a lame horse. We know that it has a lot of performance in it, but it is not happy that someone wants to ride it, and the way of riding style does not suit him either. It still has its own head, which sometimes runs a risk of throwing you off. We still have to get used to each other and develop it so that it becomes fast and tame." Another team that might inch closer to Red Bull as soon as Baku even is Ferrari. In terms of the F1 World Championship, the team had a terrible Sunday afternoon in Melbourne as Charles Leclerc quit on the first lap after colliding with Lance Stroll, and Carlos Sainz fell from 4th to 12th place after getting a 5-second penalty for colliding with Fernando Alonso. Even though it was clear that the team was upset, Vasseur said that at least some questions about its race form were answered. After the poor Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where both drivers fell down the rankings when they switched to hard tyres, Ferrari spent the time leading up to the Melbourne weekend putting more emphasis on long-run performance, and even though Leclerc didn't get to see if the plan worked, but Sainz had a good race, even though he lost out by pitting just before the first red flag. Most of his competitors were able to change their tyres for free during the stoppage. Before the last restart and after the accident with Alonso, he was back up to 4th. "We are a bit down with all of this," Vasseur told motorsport.com when asked about the weekend. "But overall, I think the mood is positive, because we did a mega step forward in terms of performance in the race, and we will build up the rest of the season on this. I will be positive and I will push again and again. I think overall that we did a decent step forward. Yesterday, we were frustrated after the quali, because we had the feeling that we didn't put everything together. But the pace was there. Despite some challenges, Vasseur sees the positives and wants to focus on building for the next race. He notes that they had a good recovery after a previous race and that their pace was strong. He gives credit to Carlos for his ability to come back through the field after a red flag. When asked about updates for the upcoming Baku race, Vasseur suggested that they will have updates throughout the season, but hints that they may not have a package specifically for Baku because it is a sprint race with added risks. He emphasizes a need to prepare for the weekend and not worry about potential damage. It's going to be interesting to see how the restrictions will hit Red Bull, because the team has a very chunky advantage in front of other teams, and the wind tunnel and CFD restrictions need to be significant in order for the Austrian squad to actually feel them. With Mercedes, Ferrari, and we must not forget Aston Martin already improving their cars within this 3-week period until the next race in Baku, we are in for a good ride this season as viewers and enjoyers of the sport. Only time will answer all our questions, and whether we'll have an interesting season, at least in a small part as interesting as 2021. What are your thoughts? How hard will Red Bull be affected by the restrictions coming up? Will they feel it, or the difference between them and other cars on the grid is high enough so as to not provide them with any issues? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.